movie, and I can't remember which movie it was, but I remember Burt Reynolds, and I remember he was struggling in the water, and he was being pulled offshore, and he was, concerned that he was going to drown, and finally he gets to this point, and he says, God, God, he said, if you just help me out, I'll give you 90% of everything I make from now on, and so after a few minutes, the tide sort of shifts and he starts moving back towards the shore, and he gets a little ways further back and he goes, well, maybe I'll give you 80%, and then he gets a little further in and then it drops down. Well, maybe I'll give you 60%. And then he gets closer to shore. Well, God, I'll give you 10%. And then he finally gets to where his feet are he can touch bottom, and he walks out of the water, and then he stops for a moment and he says, looks up and he says, don't worry, God, I'll remember you once in a while. I wonder how many of us turn to God into that sort of space when we're in trouble, when we have a challenge in our life, when something's in our face, when there's an issue that shows up, and we start seeking to enter into a bargain. How many of us bargain with God? Well, if you do this, I'll do that, and, we'll kind of get into that sort of space. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people come up to me in my various ministries that I've been in, and they say, well, I bought this lottery ticket, and I promised God that if I won, I'll give 50% to the church. And then I think about Burt Reynolds' story, and the possibilities, and it's almost as though there's an effort to strike a bargain right in that specific moment. And so, I sort of take that with equanimity and thinking, well, that would be great, affirming that it is possible. I mean, it could happen. So I don't want to discount it. I want to make sure that I'm in the right space. The real truth is that the divine presence that is within us and that's all around us is not capable of making a bargain. It is not possible for us to come into a bargain with God, because the Spirit of God, that divine presence within us, is just simply there doing its thing. It's showing up, doing its purpose every moment of every day. It is seeking to express in and through us. It is doing what it is supposed to be doing all the time. And the only reason that there may be some disconnect or some effort to make a bargain is because we're feeling separate from that. And the bargain is about coming back into alignment with who it is that we are and what's seeking to happen in and through us every moment of every day. There's this kind of human spiritual dichotomy that shows up in our experience. And the choice that we really have in this dichotomy is, where do we get our direction from? Where do we turn when we're seeking guidance or when we're seeking to have some wisdom come into our life? And the human spiritual dichotomy is that most of the time we often look to the world around us. How many of us look for advice from this person, or we say, well, I'd like to do this, what do you think? Or we seek input, which isn't necessarily inappropriate. It's certainly appropriate oftentimes to get feedback and to check in and so on and so forth. But often we're looking for things to change around us, or we're looking for something to happen around us, or we're looking for some shift in consciousness or something to take place in the world around us. And yet, the truth is that in our spiritual life and in our spiritual journey, one of the places that we come to is, where do we get our direction from? How do we make our decisions? How do we call forth the highest and best in us in every moment, and how do we decide what it is that is ours to do? And so we either have the choice of looking at our five senses and getting our input around us, or stopping for a moment and calling forth, not in the sense of a bargain, but calling forth in the sense of a listening, the wisdom that is within us. The Spirit of God that's wanting to speak through us, that's wanting to tell us what it is that is ours to do, even if what is ours to do does not line up with what we think of in the context of our life experience right then. Even if what it is that we want to do doesn't necessarily please, the family or the parents or the whoever it is. If we listen to what it is that's ours to do and we follow that, then we're listening to Spirit and we're getting our direction from where it is that it should come. So my commitment in terms of my promise to God, because we all have that sense of promise. My commitment is not to strike a bargain or to make a promise because I want some quid pro quo reality to show up because I said I would do this, and if I do this, you do that. What my commitment is to listen. My promise to God is to simply listen to what is going on inside of myself and my life and my experience, so that when I make decisions about my life, it's coming out of some substance. It's coming out of some sense of connection to who I am and what's seeking to happen in my experience. And I think that's true for all of us. I think the real promise that we make when we choose to live and to walk a spiritual journey, the sort of the implied promise, is that we will listen. We will listen to the wisdom within us. And it isn't that we discount the wisdom around us. Certainly that can play a role in how it is that we show up. It certainly can determine how our guidance is expressed in the world. But the real sense of guidance has to come from within our own being. I think about tithing. Tithing is probably one of the things that we often is talked about in the context of creating prosperity in our lives. And there is sort of a quid pro quo sort of dynamic that shows up in the conversation about that. But when I get still and I think about why I tithe, what comes up for me is that I tithe because I want to acknowledge God in my life. And it's a way of doing that. And it's not about asking for something. It's about opening my heart. It's a heart space, because when we give, we are connected. When we give, our heart is open. And when we give systematically, we create a systematic process where our heart can be more open more consistently. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not about getting this from doing that. It's not about making a bargain. It's really an affirmation that I want to live an integrous life, that I want to be in integrity with what is going on in the world around me and within me, to be the most authentic and fullest expression of God in whatever moment that occurs in our experience. So the only promise is just to listen and to follow. To listen and to follow. Not give me a job, or give me this or give me that. Just simply to be open. To be open to Spirit's guidance and know that if I don't have a job, that I'll be guided, that there's one waiting for me, and I'll be guided if I'll simply stop and listen and not get frantic and not get all wound up and panic and all the stuff that might show up around that because, the world isn't showing up the way we think it ought to show up.